Johnny Carson was 3 jokes into his monologue about the Pentagon Papers when a crash echoed through Studio One that made him freeze mid-punchline. A Vietnam veteran's German Shepherd service dog had suddenly collapsed in the front row, its body convulsing violently on the studio floor, while its owner, a double amputee in a wheelchair, screamed, "Please God, not Rex too!" But what Johnny Carson did next, abandoning his desk to crawl on the floor beside a dying dog while 20 million Americans watched, would reveal the one thing that could completely shatter the king of late night, a soldier's tears. November 18th, 1974. The Tonight Show was hitting its stride at 11:42 p.m., with Johnny Carson wearing his signature navy suit with the thin silver tie, the one Freddie de Cordova always said that made him look presidential but approachable. The Burbank studio maintained its perfect 72 degrees, with all 300 seats filled for this Monday night taping. Johnny was in rare form, riffing on President Ford's recent pardon of Nixon, his timing so precise that even the cameramen were chuckling behind their equipment. The audience had already erupted 6 times in the first 12 minutes, a personal record that Johnny privately tracked on the small notepad he kept inside his desk. Ed McMahon sat in his designated spot, his booming laugh punctuating Johnny's punchlines with the reliability of a Swiss watch. Doc Severinsen had just finished warming up the band with a particularly jazzy rendition of Chattanooga Choo Choo, and the brass section's instruments still gleamed under the hot studio lights. Everything was unfolding exactly as it had for the past 12 years, each element of the show operating in perfect synchronization, like a well-oiled entertainment machine that had produced 2,847 episodes without a single major incident. The monologue that night focused on the Pentagon Papers revelations that were still trickling out, and Johnny had crafted 11 jokes about government secrecy, each one building on the last. He'd rehearsed them that afternoon with his writers, adjusting the delivery on joke number 7 to hit harder on the word classified. The studio audience included several groups that night: a tour bus from Iowa, 3 rows of UCLA students who'd won tickets in a campus lottery, and in the front row, a special allocation of seats reserved for wounded veterans from the Long Beach VA Hospital, part of NBC's ongoing community outreach program. The show was tracking to be one of their highest-rated November episodes. The energy was electric, that perfect cocktail of Monday night anticipation and pre-Thanksgiving warmth that made audiences especially receptive to Johnny's Midwestern charm. Nothing suggested this would become the night that changed everything. The crash came at exactly 11:43 p.m., and just as Johnny was delivering the setup to his 7th joke about classified documents being so secret, even the secrets have secrets. It wasn't a small sound. It was thunderous, like a piece of heavy equipment falling, followed immediately by a guttural animal cry that cut through the studio like a blade. Johnny's hands, which had been gesturing to emphasize his punchline, froze in midair. His eyes darted toward the source of the sound, stage left, front row, where chaos was erupting in real time. A German Shepherd, massive, probably 90 pounds, was convulsing on the studio floor, its body rigid and shaking with violent spasms. The dog wore a red service vest with Vietnam Veteran Service Animal emblazoned across its side, and its legs were kicking desperately against nothing, claws scraping against the polished concrete floor with a sound that made everyone wince. But it was the human cry that truly stopped everything, a sound of pure anguish from a man in a wheelchair, a double amputee whose remaining stumps of legs were visibly trembling as he tried desperately to lower himself from his chair. "Rex! Oh, God, Rex, please! Somebody help him! Please, God, not Rex, too!" The veteran's voice cracked and broke, carrying a weight of loss that suggested this wasn't his first goodbye. The studio lights caught the tears streaming down his weathered face. a face that looked far older than the 30-something years he probably carried. Fred de Cordova stood frozen in the wings, his clipboard hanging uselessly at his side. The camera operators looked between their viewfinders and Johnny, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away from this raw display of anguish. 2 NBC pages started moving toward the disturbance, but stopped, clearly out of their depth. The audience sat in stunned paralysis, some covering their mouths, others half standing, but uncertain what to do. Johnny Carson, the man who had navigated every possible television crisis with unflappable composure, stood absolutely still for 3 long seconds, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and then something deeper. A decision forming behind his eyes that would shatter 30 years of professional distance. The veteran's next words changed everything. "He's all I have left," the man sobbed, his hands frantically trying to reach his convulsing dog from the wheelchair. "My whole unit, Bobby, Martinez, Thompson, they're all gone. Rex is the only one who made it back with me." The German shepherd's seizure intensified, foam beginning to form at its mouth. Its brown eyes rolled back, showing only white. The veteran's name tag, visible now as cameras instinctively zoomed in, read, "Corporal James Mitchell, USMC, 1st Battalion, 9th Marines." Johnny dropped his microphone. The sound of it hitting the stage floor echoed through the silent studio. Without a word, he vaulted over his desk. Not walked around, but actually vaulted over it in his expensive suit, and ran toward the front row. He dropped to his knees beside the convulsing dog, his hands immediately going to the animal's head, trying to prevent it from injuring itself against the floor. "Get me something soft," Johnny shouted to no one in particular. "A jacket, anything." His voice carried an authority nobody had heard before. Not the smooth entertainer's voice, but something raw and commanding. Corporal Mitchell was trying to lower himself from his wheelchair, his prosthetic attachments making it impossible to reach the floor. "He saved my life," Mitchell said through sobs, his words coming in broken fragments. "IED took my legs. Rex dragged me to cover. 300 yards. Wouldn't leave me. They tried to retire him, but he won't work with anyone else. He has nightmares, too. We both do. Please, Mr. Carson, don't let him die alone on a cold floor." The studio audience watched in absolute silence as Johnny Carson, the untouchable king of late night, cradled the head of a dying service dog in his lap, ruining his $1,000 suit with foam and saliva. His own tears were falling freely now, dropping onto Rex's fur. "How long have you had him, Corporal?" Johnny asked, his voice gentle but breaking. Mitchell's answer destroyed whatever composure remained in the studio. 6 years. He's died for me every night in my dreams. But I can't watch him die for real. I can't lose another brother." Johnny Carson did something that no one in that studio expected. He looked directly at Corporal Mitchell and said, "He's not going to die alone, James. You hear me? We're going to help Rex together." Johnny's voice carried a conviction that seemed to come from somewhere deep and personal. He turned to the audience, his face streaked with tears, but his jaw set with determination. "Is there a veterinarian in the audience? Anyone with animal medical training?" His voice cut through the paralyzed silence like a command from a different Johnny, perhaps the Navy communications officer he'd once been. A woman in the third row shot up. "I'm a vet tech at Burbank Animal Hospital." She was already climbing over seats, her nursing instincts overriding any hesitation about disrupting a live television broadcast. Johnny immediately waved her forward. "Doc," he called to Severinsen, "get her whatever she needs. Ed, call Burbank Animal Hospital right now. Tell them we need their emergency team here immediately. Tell them Johnny Carson is asking personally." While Ed McMahon rushed to the backstage phones, Johnny never let go of Rex. He positioned the dog carefully on its side, following the vet tech's instructions as she checked Rex's vitals. "His heart rate is irregular, but strong," she announced. "This looks like a seizure, possibly triggered by PTSD. Yes, dogs can have it too. We need to keep him stable and get him cooled down." Johnny immediately took off his suit jacket, using it to fan the overheated dog while cradling its head in his lap. "James," Johnny said, looking up at the corporal, "tell me about the day Rex saved you." It seemed like an odd request in the crisis, but Johnny's tone suggested purpose. As Mitchell began recounting the story through tears, the explosion, the smoke, Rex's teeth gripping his uniform collar and pulling, Rex's convulsions began to slow slightly, as if responding to his handler's voice. Johnny kept his own hand on Rex's chest, feeling each labored breath. "That's it, boy," Johnny whispered to the dog. "Your Marine needs you. You can't leave him now. You've got more work to do, soldier." The Burbank Animal Hospital emergency team burst through the studio doors 12 minutes later, their arrival causing a commotion as they wheeled in veterinary equipment past stunned NBC pages. By then, Rex's seizure had subsided, but he lay panting heavily, his eyes unfocused, occasionally whimpering. Johnny hadn't moved from the floor, his pants torn at the knees, his white dress shirt stained with saliva and blood from where Rex had bitten his own tongue. The veterinary team worked around Johnny, who refused to let go of Rex's head, as if his touch was somehow keeping the dog tethered to life. Within 30 minutes of the initial collapse, NBC's switchboard was overwhelmed. 14,000 calls came in during the remainder of the broadcast hour. People offering money for Rex's treatment, veterans sharing their own service dog stories, veterinarians from across the country offering free consultations. The network executives watching from the control room made the unprecedented decision to keep the cameras rolling. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was something else entirely. A moment of collective national witnessing that transcended television. Johnny finally stood up when the veterinary team had Rex stabilized on a stretcher, ready for transport. His appearance was shocking. The usually immaculate host looked destroyed, his clothing ruined, his face puffy from crying. He walked over to Corporal Mitchell, whose wheelchair had been brought closer to Rex. "James, they're taking him to the emergency clinic. I'm going with you." Mitchell shook his head. "Mr. Carson, I can't afford—" Johnny cut him off with a raised hand. "This is Rex we're talking about. Rex who saved a United States Marine. There's no bill. There will never be a bill." The audience rose in spontaneous applause. Not the usual cooed response, but something organic and emotional. Many were crying. Johnny turned to address them directly, his voice hoarse. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to go with Corporal Mitchell and Rex. Ed will finish the show." He paused, looking at the cameras. Sometimes life reminds us what actually matters. It's not jokes or ratings. It's taking care of each other, especially those who sacrificed everything for us. Over the following 3 weeks, Rex's recovery became a national story. Johnny visited the Burbank Animal Hospital every single day, often arriving at 6 a.m. before anyone could recognize him, sitting with Rex while Corporal Mitchell navigated his physical therapy appointments. The veterinarians discovered Rex had a brain tumor, likely from exposure to burn pits in Iraq, that was causing the seizures. Treatment would cost $30,000. Within 48 hours of this diagnosis being mentioned on The Tonight Show, donations exceeded $500,000. Johnny quietly directed the overflow into a new fund, the Rex Foundation for Military Service Animals. The ripple effects were immediate and profound. The Department of Veterans Affairs, facing public pressure after Rex's story, announced a comprehensive review of their service animal medical coverage policies. Within 6 months, they would implement full medical coverage for all certified veteran service animals, a policy change affecting 20,000 veterans nationwide. Military working dog handlers from Vietnam to Iraq began sharing their stories publicly, many for the first time, breaking decades of silence about the bonds between warriors and their dogs. Johnny's relationship with Corporal Mitchell evolved from that night into something deeper. Every Thursday, Johnny would have lunch with Mitchell at a small diner in Burbank, away from cameras and publicity. They talked about war, about loss, about survivor's guilt. Mitchell later revealed that Johnny had confessed his own military memories, things he'd seen in the Navy that he'd never discussed publicly. He understood the weight of carrying dead friends, Mitchell would say years later. That's why he got on that floor. He knew Rex and I were carrying the same ghosts. The Tonight Show implemented new policies after that night. Reserved seating for veterans became permanent, with dedicated medical staff on standby. Johnny personally funded a green room specifically for military families, decorated with letters and photos sent by grateful veterans. He never publicized any of this. The staff only revealed these details after his retirement, when they could finally speak about the profound changes that November night had triggered in their usually guarded host. The Rex incident stripped away 30 years of carefully maintained persona, revealing aspects of Johnny Carson that even his closest associates hadn't seen. Fred de Cordova, his producer for 17 years, later admitted he'd never seen Johnny move with such urgency. When he vaulted over that desk, it wasn't planned, wasn't thought out. It was pure instinct, like he recognized something in that moment that triggered something primal. What emerged in the following months was a pattern of hidden military consciousness that Johnny had buried since his Navy days, an immediate response to crisis, an understanding of trauma that went beyond civilian comprehension. Private letters found after Johnny's death revealed he'd been quietly corresponding with Vietnam veterans since 1968, using fake names and P.O. boxes to avoid publicity. One letter, dated just weeks before the Rex incident, showed Johnny wrestling with survivor's guilt from a USS Pennsylvania incident where 2 sailors died in an accident he'd narrowly avoided. "I still see their faces," he'd written. "The randomness of who lives and who dies. It never leaves you." This explained why Mitchell's words, "I can't lose another brother," had broken through Johnny's professional armor so completely. Staff members began noticing changes in Johnny after that night. He started arriving earlier, spending time with the studio security guards, many of whom were veterans. He knew their names, their service branches, their deployment stories. His monologue jokes about war became notably absent. When pressed about the Rex incident in a rare candid interview with Tom Brokaw, Johnny's response revealed his deeper philosophy. "We ask these young men to become warriors, to do unconscionable things in our name. Then we expect them to come home and be normal. The least we can do is get on the floor when they need us." The most telling revelation came from Johnny's personal physician, who disclosed years later that Johnny had been treating his own PTSD symptoms since the 1960s. Nightmares about naval accidents, hypervigilance that masqueraded as perfectionism, the emotional numbness he maintained through comedy. The Rex incident had cracked open something Johnny had spent decades sealing shut. His tears that night weren't just for a dying dog. They were for every soldier who came home different, including himself. The Rex Foundation, established from that spontaneous moment of crisis, operates 49 facilities across America today, having provided medical care to over 100,000 military service animals. The Foundation's headquarters in Los Angeles displays the original footage from that November night on a continuous loop in their lobby, with a bronze plaque reading, "Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion create the largest waves of change." Johnny Carson, November 18, 1974. The Foundation has expanded beyond medical care to include retirement homes for military working dogs, PTSD therapy programs pairing veterans with rescued animals, and funding for veterinary students who commit to serving military communities. In 2010, the Pentagon officially named their service dog medical facility at Fort Bragg the Carson Rex Treatment Center, the first military facility named for both an entertainer and an animal. The dedication ceremony was attended by Corporal Mitchell, now in his 60s, accompanied by Rex III, the grandson of the original Rex, who had survived his tumor and lived until 1981. Mitchell spoke about how that night changed not just his life, but the entire conversation around veteran mental health and service animals. Johnny Carson, getting on that floor, told America that our pain was real, that our bonds with these animals weren't just sentiment, they were survival. Universities now study the November 18th broadcast in journalism and media ethics courses as an example of when breaking conventional broadcasting rules serves a higher purpose. The footage is analyzed in veterinary schools to teach emergency response, in psychology programs to understand collective trauma response, and in military academies to discuss the warrior's bond with service animals. Dr. Patricia Hayes at Columbia's School of Journalism calls it the moment television stopped being a medium and became a mirror for American conscience. The Tonight Show archives receive over 10,000 requests annually specifically for the Rex incident footage, making it the most requested segment in the show's history, surpassing celebrity interviews, comedy sketches, and even Johnny's final episode. Veterans organizations use it in fundraising, therapy groups show it to validate emotional bonds with service animals, and military recruitment centers play it to demonstrate America's commitment to its warriors. The Rex incident exposed a fundamental truth about American society's relationship with its warriors, that beneath the patriotic rhetoric and yellow ribbons lies a profound disconnection from the actual cost of service. Johnny's instantaneous abandonment of his role as entertainer to become simply a human being, responding to suffering, revealed how artificial the barriers between celebrity and citizen, performer and person truly are. When he dropped to that floor, he demonstrated that compassion requires no script, no rehearsal, no proper lighting, just the courage to act when another human being is drowning in anguish. The moment transcended its specific circumstances to illuminate broader truths about trauma and healing. Rex's seizure, triggered by PTSD from battlefield experiences, paralleled the invisible wounds carried by countless veterans who appeared functional but were internally collapsing. Johnny's public tears gave permission for a generation of men taught that emotional expression was weakness to acknowledge their own buried pain. Mental health professionals noted a significant spike in veterans seeking treatment in the months following the broadcast, many citing Johnny's vulnerability as their catalyst for finally asking for help. The spiritual dimension of that night went beyond denominational boundaries. The image of Johnny Carson, wealthy, successful, untouchable, kneeling on a dirty floor cradling a dying dog while a broken soldier wept, became almost iconic, reminiscent of religious art depicting compassion transcending social hierarchy. Chaplains across military bases incorporated the story into sermons about brotherhood, sacrifice, and the sacred bonds formed in service. The moment asked fundamental questions. What do we owe those who serve? How do we honor sacrifice? When does protocol yield to humanity? Perhaps most significantly, the incident revealed our collective hunger for authentic human connection in increasingly performative times. The audience's silence, their tears, their overwhelming response afterwards suggested a deep societal need to witness genuine emotion, to see powerful people abandon their pedestals and join us in the messy, painful, beautiful reality of being human. Johnny's tears weren't just about Rex or Mitchell. They were about every unspoken loss, every swallowed sob, every time we chose composure over connection.